The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
We often think that we are good faith actors. And I believe that the real test as to whether or not we are good faith actors is being honest with ourselves as to where that point is in our own personal lives, where we will gaslight, where we would distort the truth, where we would twist the facts, where we would ignore logic, where we would ignore sound reasoning simply for the purposes of protecting our own power. The same thing, we often think that we're good people. But the real question is, at what point will we lay aside this pretense that we are good people in exchange for doing bad things? It generally happens when something or someone is a threat to our preferred way of living, a threat to our power, a threat to our power, be it economic or political power, or it could just be someone who is a threat to our reputation. I start there with introspection because it's from my ability to look within myself that, and hopefully you too could look within yourself, that we can see exactly how dangerous the people who are leading our planet, quite frankly, how dangerous they really are. Because we've come to a point in human history where the leaders of this world are required, not out of some sense of cosmic determination or anything like that. They're not just predestined to be bad faith actors, but in order for them to maintain their power, they have to ascend to the heights of bad faith. They have to engage in the gaslighting. They have to erect propaganda machines that generate billions of dollars every year for the purposes of brainwashing the masses, to keep the masses from ever realizing what the real score is. It's not just conservatives, but they are the front runners of this issue in this country. In fact, I would say that the right-wing faction of every group, the reactionaries, see, some don't even realize that they are conservative, or they don't think that they're right-wing because they don't consider themselves Republican, but they are in fact reactionaries. And they are reactionaries because they base their political participation and they base their position in life on how they respond to someone else's liberties and someone else's freedoms. I'm giving you a very general and very broad. I'm being non-specific in my language because what I'm saying, as we piece it together, it is applicable to almost every scenario. Are we talking about Israel and Palestine? Well, it absolutely requires not only the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, but it requires billions of dollars in propaganda. It requires billions of dollars in lobbying. It requires, it just requires a full-on effort for people to ignore the massacre that's happening in order to justify the actions taken by the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu. To actively convince yourself that murdering those children is a good thing is it is the gaslighting of oneself to the highest degree. It is lying to yourself. It is convincing yourself that you are not the oppressor, and that in fact the people who are your victims are the actual victimizers. That's just one issue. If you want to bring it back to the United States, you want to talk about let's talk about COVID-19. The amount of ignorance that is required the amount of propaganda that is required to have successfully politicized something that in 2021, in 2020, we should have been able to save so many lives. But because ignorance has become a vital component, bad faith communication, propaganda, disingenuousness, intentional obtuseness, all of those things have become required elements and components of maintaining the political power and the economic power for the rich. I mean, every single issue, there is a threshold that every single person must cross within themselves, that we must cross collectively as a community, and that we must consider collectively as a human species. There is a Rubicon that is crossed. And once you cross it, it's very possible that even the best of us who think that we are good faith actors and that we would never tell a lie, or that we would never gaslight somebody, or we would never engage in propaganda or deceit, there is a threshold that becomes a great temptation. And we have to pause and consider, could I be the villain in someone's narrative? Am I the bad faith actor? Again, I do it from an introspective perspective because it's so easy to point to someone else and say they are the bad person. And it's our ability to always look at other people and see when they have been the bad actors, the bad faith actors, when they have been the antagonists. It's so easy for us to point out in someone else, to the point where even when someone is innocent, we have mastered the art of taking a victim and making them the bad guy in order to protect our own reputation, our own power, or our own standing. And if we don't have the ability to look within ourselves and actually ask ourselves, at what point have we been the bad faith actors, then therein lies the problem. We have set ourselves up to ourselves become the oppressor. Now, once we've done the introspection, we have to pause and look and say that there is no equivalence between some of the things that we engage in bad faith. Of course, I have not always done everything right. And I'm not even going to tell you on this podcast the ways in which I have been a gaslighter in my personal life. It's none of your business. But there's no equivalence between some of the things that we have done individually as we have a reflection and we look internally at ourselves, and we can see, yeah, in this relationship, in this situation, at this time, and on this job with that person, we were gaslighters. We were the bad faith actors. We lied. We used propaganda. We used deceit. We twisted their words, and we made sure that they turned out to be the bad guy when in actuality it was us. But in those things, it cannot be compared to the things that we see on the national and international level that is happening to humanity as a whole. We are being led by gaslighters. And the things that they have to employ in order to maintain their political and economic power, and in order to for the ruling elite to remain the ruling elite, it requires the constant dumbing down of society. It requires propaganda machines like we have never seen before in our lives. Let's just take police brutality. Can you turn on television at any single point in a day and not be bombarded with propaganda, with nonstop propaganda that uplifts the police state? That is a multi-billion-dollar industry every single year, creating propaganda. Like you will never see something on television that actually challenges the police state. That's because in order to maintain that control over the people, they have to employ that propaganda. And our politicians have to gaslight us. See, I'm using generic terms because I believe that it's applicable to almost everything that we're going through. It's very simply put, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I would just flip it just ever so slightly and say, if your goal is to maintain power, then you will be corrupted absolutely. It is our unwillingness to relinquish control. It is our unwillingness to do no harm, especially if harm is required to protect our reputation.
How many politicians? How many men? Let's just skip the different cat. Let's just go to men. How many men have harmed so many women, not only in terms of abuse, be it sexual, physical, emotional, but also in terms of the gaslighting that has been required to protect our reputations as men? You know, at every single level, you have to ask yourself, is what you're trying to protect worth losing your soul? Now, I'm not moralizing. I really am setting this up not to moralize to you. I really just want, I really want us to understand the scale of the problem. There is a system that surrounds us, that every single one of us have been born into. It is a system that has convinced us that there is no possible way of doing anything better. And it requires trillions of dollars being spent every single year across the globe in propaganda. And I don't care what state you are a part of, that state system is using propaganda to make you believe that there's no way to do it better. And that system uses violence in order to make sure that if any of us get the idea that we should do something better, that there is a police state to come down and crush us and force us into submission. And it's all because the powerful will never yield their power willingly. But in order to maintain that power, they have to expend so many resources. They have to engage in the height of propaganda. They have to engage in the mastery. They have to become masters of gaslighting. And one final component that we have seen in 2020, especially in 2021, is the level of ignorance that they must keep the people perpetually in order to protect their power. That is the reality of our global order. And I don't care what level of analysis we're looking at. That is the reality of our nation states. Every government uses force. Every government engages in propaganda. Every government engages in suppressing the vote and in controlling the ability of the people to share in that power. Every single government gaslights us and tells us and gives us all these promises and all these hopes of what they're going to be able to do. Meanwhile, they have one goal: preserve their own economic and political power. That is the reality of what we're dealing with. And it is the combination of the ignorance. It is the ignorant part. It is the fact that they have dumbed down our society so much so that if the politician is not gaslighting us, look at QAnon, look at the Republican Party, look at the conservative movement. If there are politicians out there who are trying to tell them the truth, now the people, the conservative movement in this country is so ignorant that they would crucify a politician who told them the truth in exchange for the gaslighter in chief. The problem is that there is a threshold, generally speaking, in every single one of us. And it could be something as simple as trying to save face. I don't know if there's anything more powerful than trying to save your own reputation. I can tell you that myself, because there's things that I would never tell you. I tell you a lot, but there's things I would never tell you. But the question is will I actively gaslight you in order to protect myself? Will I gaslight my wife? Will I gaslight my children? Will I gaslight my siblings in order to save face? Will I actively, and then the question obviously becomes, does this information that I'm trying to withhold, does it harm someone? And does my active suppression of that information and my active gaslighting harm them? See, I've come to the realization that every single one of us has the ability to be the oppressor. Now, are we in a position to be an oppressor on a community-wide level? Or can we be the villain on a nationwide level? Can we possibly ever become the villain on the international stage? Probably not. So I don't want us to slow down again. I want us to be careful not to slow down the purpose of what I'm saying with so much introspection that we don't get shit done. Excuse me. No. I just want you to understand how it works and how deeply rooted this power structure is, and to the extent to which they will go to protect itself. If you're willing
to gaslight someone who loves you in order to protect your reputation? Just imagine how far a politician is willing to go to gaslight you in order to protect their power. And they don't even know you. And they don't even like you. They don't care about you. And if that's the case, just imagine how far this state, wherever you are, whether it be the United States government, whether it be, I don't care what government, whether it be the United Kingdom, whether it be any nation state, how far will it go to preserve its institutions and to preserve its grip on power? Do you actually think that these governments would not completely obliterate and massacre groups of people who become a valid threat to them? Do you actually think, let's go to the global order. Do you think for a second that the capitalists globally would not drop nuclear weapons in order to crush a real revolution that posed a viable threat to it? I just at every single level of analysis, I just want you to understand what we're dealing with is when someone or something or even a concept or a new economic paradigm or whenever a thing becomes a threat to the current existing power structure, that's exactly where you're going to see not only propaganda, not only resources, unbelievably so. I'm looking at the fact that Amazon spent $3,200 a day on a single attorney. And that's just one attorney. They had an entire fleet of attorneys. They would rather have paid attorneys $3,200 a day to actively work against the labor efforts in their company rather than giving their workers the ability to organize and paying their workers livable wages and giving them good working conditions. Look at how much the pharmaceutical industry uses to lobby. Look at how much they use for marketing. The viral clip today of Katie Porter, the Democratic Congresswoman from California, as she was grilling AbbVie, which is a pharmaceutical company. The CEO, Richard Gonzalez, she grilled him today and she broke down the amount of money that they spend on advertising, which was obscenely more. So it was obscenely more than what they use for research and development. But what did the ads all say? These are innovative drugs. No, they weren't. They were the same drugs. They just spent billions of dollars on marketing to convince users of their drugs that it was innovative. So how much money will they spend in order to protect what they have? Nobody. The bottom line is, do we really expect people who have to not do everything they possibly can to protect themselves from the have-nots? I don't care if it's in your personal household. I don't care if it's on your job. I don't care if it's in your community group, organization. I don't care if it is in your schools, your universities. I don't care if it doesn't matter what level of analysis, whether you're looking at your own political party, if you're looking at the Democratic Party, they do the same thing. Because do we really expect people who have power to yield that power to a new group? Therein lies the problem. When it is really and truly time for there to be a peaceful transfer of power, we don't get a peaceful transfer of power. We get gaslit. We get indoctrinated. We get propagandized. And if we overcome all those things, then we get beat into submission by the police state or the rules and regulations that are perfectly designed to make sure that the system is protected. They're not here to protect and serve you. They're here to protect and serve the institutions, the powerful, what already exists. That's what we're up against. And I think any analysis, and again, I'm using intentionally vague language because you can apply this, not vague, I'm using intentionally universal language because you can apply this to a class analysis in terms of a strategy in order to bring about a real revolution, or you could just use this to understand why your girlfriend is gaslighting you, why your husband is gaslighting you. Because think about it. How far do people go just to protect their reputation? Now think how far they would go to protect their money.
how far they're going to go to protect their power, how far they're going to go to protect themselves from the people that they have historically oppressed. Why do you think they're losing their damn minds over critical race theory? They're losing their minds over critical race theory because if history is ever told through the lens of the oppressed, then the oppressor will be chased into the sea like the pigs in the Bible. That of course, of course the Democratic Party was going. Why were we so foolish as to not realize that at some point in the primaries of 2020 that all of those Democrats were not going to coalesce around one candidate, no matter who that candidate? Why were we not prepared for that? Because we thought that we were going to be playing a fair game. And in all fairness, that's a tactic. But we could have predicted that if we understood that these institutions are not going to go down quietly. They are not going to play fair. They are not going to play nice. They are not going to just lay down. The proof is in the pudding. Look at every single structure that has been in place in order to stop our progress. Now I want you to think about what the healthcare industry is going to do to prevent us from getting Medicare for all. You think they're going to go down quietly when this is hundreds of billions of dollars in profit every single year? You think they're simply going to just let us vote and get Medicare for all? Does this mean that we don't try? No. Absolutely. We keep trying. We try like hell, but we can always stay one step ahead of them if we understand that there's no limit to what they were willing to do in order to protect their power. We can't sit around and expect any of them to play fair. And simultaneously, and here's the gag. Here's a gag. Powerful people, they do this to themselves. We're getting ready to face an assault on a woman's right to choose. Did Democrats really not believe that Republicans will stop at nothing to get their here's the other thing. What happens when the thing that is so precious to a person that they're willing to gaslight, cheat, steal, use propaganda, and even kill? What happens when that thing that is so precious that they are willing to become the bad guy, they're willing to become the villain over? What happens when that thing is controlling you and having control over your life? Now, this is when we get into the real evil, into the real maliciousness, right? It's one thing to protect what you have. It's another to protect your ability to control someone else. And yes, that's applicable up and down every level of analysis, from capitalism on the global stage all the way down to what's going on in probably your relationship. But I'm staying out of that. That's between you and your counselors. I want you to think about that in context of what the Republican Party and the conservative movement in this country is so desperate to do. They are so desperate to be able to have control over your body and who you love and who you marry, who you sleep with and who you worship. And if you don't worship who they say worship and sleep with who they say sleep with, and if you don't do with your body what they approve of, which generally speaking, if I can go on one further tangent, it's not because they really truly believe in morality, in sexual morality. They just want to control and dominate your body and have your body for their pleasure. That's what they're fighting to control. They're fighting not to control their bodies. They're fighting to control your bodies. And they're willing to break every single rule, every single norm, every institution. They're willing to spend billions of dollars in lobbying. They're willing to deny Barack Obama his pick in Merrick Garland. And then they're willing to speed up the process when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in order to slide in a pick of Amy Coney Barrett. They're willing to ignore the fact that everybody knows that Brett Kavanaugh, who loves beer, actually probably did exactly what his accusers said. They didn't care about any of that because at all costs, they have got to be able to control your body. And did the Democrats not realize that they were going to engage in gaslighting, bad faith actions, in brute force, in propaganda, in dumbing down their population, and lying, just outright lying, all the evil, bad faith things that are necessary to maintain power, they were willing to do in order to maintain the power to control your body. And so while the Democratic Party was gaslighting us, progressives, and
doing everything that they could to protect themselves, they must have forgotten that there's a whole nother level of evil out there from the Republican Party willing to do the exact same thing on 10 times 10 in order to be able to control your body. We have got to always be able to quickly ascertain where is that line. And in some cases, that line, let me be very specific here, the line in which what we are requiring, what we are demanding becomes a threat to the powerful. When we come to the line where we are asking for something that becomes a threat to their economic power, meaning we want to raise taxes, their political power, meaning we want to maintain the right to vote, right? The power of white supremacy to be able to do whatever it wants to do without any accountability, right? At any point we come to that line where we are actual threat to this system, they are going to play dirty. And if we're not prepared for it, we're going to always be on the back foot. We're going to always be responding. We're going to always be reacting to the fact that they are nothing that they're not willing to do in order to control us, the people. I don't know if, well, no, I do know that this made sense. I hope that you got it because I know this makes absolute sense. And I also know that understanding this is probably the first step to us reevaluating a whole lot of things that we consider from theory, a whole lot of things that we consider as political strategy. Like let's take one step further. Did we not expect capital to ignore the markets when it came to the price that they pay labor? Did we not really expect, are we surprised? Were we caught off guard when restaurants would rather put signs on their drive-thru saying nobody wants to work instead of doing what the labor, what supply and demand demands? You got a shortage in labor? Raise the cost that you pay labor. Raise the price, the wages that you pay labor. Did we really think that they were going to abide by their own rules to their economic detriment? Because if we actually thought that, shame on us. Now, if one time, shame on you, 2 times, shame on us. We can't let these things catch us off guard again. The way you need to be able to analyze all these situations is what I'm asking for a threat to them? Is it a threat to their economic value? Are they going to have to pay more in taxes? Are they going to have to lose any, even if it's just one penny? There are people, these sociopaths, when it comes to their quarterly profit margins, it is baked into capitalism. It is baked into the system. If they can gain one more penny by breaking a union's back, they're going to break the back of that union. We need to understand that at all points, at any point where what we are requesting becomes a threat to them politically, economically, or even in terms of them saving face, the powerful will always break every rule, ignore every norm, spend obscene amounts of money purchasing politicians through quote unquote lobbying. They will spend an obscene amount. They will spend so much. They would spend enough money to cover the cost of what we're asking for before they would give us a dime more. And to them, that is rational participation. To them, they are being rational actors. They are doing the reasonable thing. Because let me ask you something. If there was something that you were hiding, your deepest, darkest fear of something being exposed, what would you not do in order to protect your reputation? Because see, it's pretty standard for those of us who are in poverty or have been in poverty. We have this chip on our shoulder towards greed. And so we have the expectation that if we ever got money, that we would reject greed. I think the same thing about me. I think that if I ever became a billionaire, I would make sure that I never became a billionaire, and I would give away every penny over $999,999,999. Every penny above that, I would always make a show of giving it away. That's what I think. But what I do know is that in order to save face, I've gaslit. I've lied. I've twisted the truth. I'm pretty damn good at it. I want to ask you the same question. How far would you go to save your reputation from the very worst thing that you have ever done that you don't ever want anyone to ever find out about? That is a type of behavior the powerful engage in order to protect their money, in order to protect their economic power, in order to protect these institutions that protect them. They will roll out the police state to crush us. We've seen it. They will ignore, they will tell you that it is free market capitalism when in actuality it is nothing but state-controlled capitalism to the benefit of the ruling elite. It is a monopolistic capitalism. They don't care. They don't care about what supply and demand says. They're going to supply all the propaganda necessary to keep their economic demands, what they want, that money, that quarterly profit margin. And they're going to do so with the same exact fervor and intensity and without any afterthought. You would not give it a second thought to twist the truth in order to protect your reputation. Similarly, the wealthy, the rich, and the powerful would never give it even an afterthought to crush us using the police state, to lie to us, to manipulate the system, to manipulate the markets, to manipulate the political, the vote in order to protect their power and in order to protect their wealth. That's the lay of the land. That's the fight that we're in. And we need to understand that very clearly. And if we can understand that very clearly, then we can understand what's necessary for us to win. I'll leave you with this. The most powerful scripture that I think I hold on to now, even now, is for us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We people who like to think that we're good faith and actors and that we are of good conscience, and just keep in the back of your mind that there is a Rubicon, there's a threshold that every one of us probably would act in bad faith. But let's set that aside for a second. Every single one of us who are of good faith and good conscience, and we're fighting for the right thing, we need to be wise enough to understand that we're dealing with a level of insidiousness that they will stop at nothing to protect their state. Do you think the United States is going to let this world order change peacefully? I doubt it very seriously. I don't think that the United States would allow, at best, they might, maybe they don't have a choice but to allow this to become a bipolar order on the global stage with China on the rise. Maybe they don't have any choice in that regard, but do you think that they're going to allow America to go down into submission without the bloodiest of fights? Do you think the capitalists are not going to employ everything, destroy, have every single one of our names on a file with every single one of our children's names and the schools that they go to? Do you think that they're not going to go the distance and do anything and everything possible to protect their wealth? Not just their wealth, but this capitalistic system? Do you think the healthcare industry ain't going to spend close to half, but they will spend more to stop us from getting Medicare for all than it would cost us to get Medicare for all? I just kind of want to be, I'm not depressed by this reality. I just think you need to know, I just wanted to put you up on game. Don't be depressed by this reality. Just use this reality to recalibrate how it is that we fight. I got plenty of ideas of how we should fight, but I would rather leave you to think for yourself. If this is how the powerful are going to act,
How do we win? That's your question. That's what I want to leave you with, because I do believe we can still win. But we need to understand how far this system is willing to go to destroy us in order to stop us from winning. And now do our calculus based on that. And I'll see you next time.